All right, ready to jump into the world of ethical hacking.
Let's do it.
Today we're talking about how to prepare for an ethical hacker interview.
These white hat hackers are vital to our digital world.
And we've got some awesome resources from RoleCatcher to help us out. Career guides, sample interview questions, even AI tools to help you perfect those answers.
Like having a personal coach and a crystal ball all in one, you can peek into the job and craft killer responses.
Exactly. By the time we're done, you'll be ready to wow those interviewers and land that awesome cybersecurity job.
Sounds good to me.
But first, we need to understand what an ethical hacker actually does.
Right, the basics.
The RoleCatcher guides define it as performing vulnerability assessments and penetration tests to find weaknesses in systems before the bad guys do.
It's like being a digital detective, searching for clues that could lead to a security breach, but stopping the crime before it happens?
I love that analogy. And with cyber attacks increasing, the demand for skilled ethical hackers is exploding. It's a career with a really bright future, BUT, as our RoleCatcher guides point out. It's not all sunshine and rainbows.
There can be downsides.
It's high stress, long hours, even ethical dilemmas you have to grapple with.
That's what makes it so challenging and rewarding. Always learning, adapting, making decisions with real-world impact.
Speaking of challenges, let's get into the heart of interview prep. A common question you'll probably face is, can you describe your experience with penetration testing? How can someone answer this without just listing projects?
It's about showing a clear understanding of the process. Don't just say, I've done penetration testing. Walk them through the phases: scoping, reconnaissance, enumeration, exploitation, reporting, the steps involved. Briefly explain each one. Like reconnaissance means gathering information about the target system.
And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can really help.
Oh yeah, the AI is amazing.
You can put in your initial answer and it'll analyze it, giving you suggestions for improvement, specifically for ethical hacker interviews. It might suggest adding specific tools you used in each phase to really showcase that hands-on experience.
Those details make your experience come alive, showing you know your stuff.
Another question that comes up a lot is, how do you stay up to date with the latest threats and vulnerabilities? This field changes so fast. How can you show that you're truly dedicated to keeping your knowledge current?
It's more than just saying, I read blogs or I go to conferences. The key is connecting your learning to practical application. For example, bring up a recent vulnerability that caught your eye. Maybe something big like the Log4Shell vulnerability that was all over the news. What interested you about it? What could its impact have been? And what did you learn from analyzing it?
That's a great way to demonstrate your passion and proactive approach. And this is another area where RoleCatcher shines. Their career guides are packed with info on conferences, publications, even online communities where ethical hackers hang out. You can mention specific examples, like attending Black Hat or DFCon, or following reputable security researchers on Twitter.
Sharing those details shows you're actively involved in the cybersecurity world, not just reading about it from the sidelines.
Okay, let's tackle a question that gets into the ethics of things. Have you ever had to deal with an ethical dilemma during a security assessment? What's the interviewer really looking for here?
It's about assessing your judgment and integrity. Can you handle the ethical complexities of hacking? How would you navigate a tricky situation? A hypothetical example works well here, even if you haven't encountered this in real life yet.
So let's say during a penetration test, you find a vulnerability. It could expose sensitive customer data, but it's outside the agreed scope of the test. What do you do?
That's the perfect example of an ethical dilemma. You have to weigh the potential harm of exploiting the vulnerability against the client's trust and the scope of what you were hired to do.
This is where RoleCatcher's AI feedback is incredibly helpful. You type in your response, and the AI analyzes it. It suggests ways to explain your ethical decision-making clearly and effectively.
Yeah, the AI can be like an ethical hacking mentor, walking you through those tough scenarios.
It might even give you follow-up questions to think about, like, how did you tell the client about your findings? Or what did you do to reduce the risk while still respecting what you were hired for?
Exactly. That preparation can make all the difference in showing your professionalism and your ethical compass during the interview.
It's about showing that you're not just a hacker, but a responsible and ethical professional.
Absolutely. That's what sets ethical hackers apart. Let's move on to a question that really tests your technical know-how. Can you explain how you would approach a social engineering test? This digs into the human side of security, which is often the weakest point.
This is where the ethical hacker becomes a bit of a psychologist,
Ex-
understanding how people think and act to find those vulnerabilities.
Social engineering is all about using human psychology to trick people into giving up access they shouldn't. To impress the interviewer, you want to walk them through your process, starting with how you would identify potential targets.
So you'd analyze the company, see how it's structured, look for employees who might fall for certain types of social engineering attacks.
Precisely. Then you'd craft believable pretexts, like pretending to be tech support or a delivery person to gain trust and get information.
And of course, it's crucial to stay ethical. No actual harm should come to the organization or its employees.
Absolutely. It's about finding weaknesses and educating people, not exploiting them. A good example is creating a fake phishing email. But instead of doing something bad, when they click it, it takes them to a page explaining the dangers of phishing.
That's a smart way to simulate a real threat without actually causing any damage. I'm curious, how would RoleCatcher's AI tools help with a question like this?
RoleCatcher's AI can look at your answer and suggest improvements, specifically for social engineering tests. It might recommend mentioning specific tools like email tracking software to see how effective your simulated phishing campaign is.
It could also remind you to highlight your understanding of ethical guidelines and data privacy regulations, which are super important in social engineering tests.
Right. Those details demonstrate your professionalism and commitment to ethical hacking principles.
Now let's get into a question that's essential for any ethical hacker. How do you make sure your testing doesn't harm the client's systems or data? This is all about responsibility and mitigating risks.
First, emphasize getting explicit permission from the client before you do anything. Outline the steps you take to define the scope of the assessment, making sure it aligns with their goals and how much risk they're willing to tolerate.
So, like a safety net, making sure your actions are controlled and won't mess up critical systems.
Exactly. Mentioning the use of isolated test environments is key here. That way, even if something goes wrong, the impact is limited and doesn't affect the live systems.
Data backups are essential too, right? Just in case.
Absolutely. Backups ensure that data can be restored quickly if any issues pop up during testing.
This is another area where RoleCatcher's AI can be really useful. It can analyze your response and suggest more risk mitigation strategies specific to ethical hacking, like using intrusion detection systems or security information and event management (SIEM) tools.
Including those details shows a deep understanding of best practices, and it shows you're dedicated to minimizing risks.
Let's move on to a question that's a bit more specialized. Can you describe your experience with network mapping and reconnaissance? This gets into the nitty-gritty of network security.
This question is about your ability to understand a network structure and find those entry points. Start by explaining the purpose of network mapping and reconnaissance. It's like creating a blueprint of the network to find those weak spots.
So you use tools like Nmap to scan ports and identify operating systems, to gather info about devices on the network.
Right. And don't forget about passive reconnaissance techniques, like looking at public records or social media to gather information without actually touching the target systems.
It's like detective work, gathering clues from what's already out there to build a picture of the target network.
Exactly. And this is where RoleCatcher's AI can help refine your answer. It might suggest mentioning specific techniques you've used, like analyzing website metadata or using search engines like Shodan to find vulnerable devices connected to the internet.
Those details show your knowledge of advanced reconnaissance techniques and your ability to think outside the box.
Let's tackle a question that's super relevant today. Can you explain how you would approach a web application penetration test? Web apps are everywhere, and they're prime targets.
This is where the ethical hacker becomes a code detective,
Exactly.
searching for vulnerabilities that could be exploited.
To impress the interviewer, outline the key phases: information gathering, vulnerability scanning, exploitation, and reporting. You know, the basic flow.
So you'd start by understanding what the web application does, then use tools and manual techniques to find those vulnerabilities.
Right. Mentioning specific tools like Burp Suite or OSPZP would be good. They're standard tools for web app testing.
And I bet you'd also talk about manual testing, since automated tools can't catch everything.
Absolutely. The human touch is crucial. It's about using your creativity to uncover vulnerabilities that automated tools might miss.
This is another spot where RoleCatcher's AI feedback can be helpful. It might suggest mentioning specific vulnerabilities you found before, like cross-site scripting, XSS, or SQL injection, and how you exploited them ethically to demonstrate your skills.
Sharing those real-world examples shows your experience and ability to identify and mitigate critical web application vulnerabilities.
Let's delve into a question that lets you show off your detective skills. Have you ever found a vulnerability that the client didn't know about? This is your chance to shine and demonstrate your ability to go above and beyond.
This is where you tell a story about your technical expertise and your commitment to responsible disclosure. Describe the specific vulnerability, how you found it, and the potential impact it could have had.
So you'd walk the interviewer through your thought process, highlighting the steps you took to verify and exploit the vulnerability, ethically, of course.
Right. And it's crucial to emphasize your commitment to responsible disclosure. Explain how you reported the vulnerability to the client, worked with them to fix it, and made sure it was fully addressed.
It's about being a trusted partner, not just a vulnerability finder.
Exactly. And this is another area where RoleCatcher's AI can provide valuable insights. It might suggest mentioning any recognition you receive for your discovery, like a bug bounty reward or a public acknowledgement from the client.
Those details demonstrate your credibility and highlight the value you bring to companies as an ethical hacker.
Now, let's shift our focus to cloud security. It's becoming more and more important. A question you might get is, can you describe your experience with cloud security assessments?
With so many businesses moving to the cloud, this question is essential.
To answer this well, highlight your familiarity with different cloud providers, like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Explain how you approach cloud security assessments, including finding misconfigurations, checking access controls, and evaluating data protection.
Mentioning specific tools you've used, like AWS Inspector or Azure Security Center, can really strengthen your answer.
Absolutely. It shows you've got practical experience with cloud security tools and methods. And don't forget to emphasize continuous monitoring and threat intelligence in the cloud.
It's about showing that you understand how dynamic cloud security is, and that you're proactive about reducing risks.
RoleCatcher's AI can also provide valuable feedback here. It might suggest mentioning any cloud security certifications you hold, like the AWS Certified Security Specialty or the Azure Security Engineer Associate, to prove your expertise.
Those certifications add to your credibility and show potential employers you're serious about cloud security.
Let's wrap up with a question that focuses on the legal and ethical side of ethical hacking. How do you ensure that your testing doesn't break any laws or regulations? This is critical, because ethical hacking has to navigate a complex legal landscape.
It's about demonstrating that you understand the boundaries of ethical hacking and that you're committed to working within the law.
Start by acknowledging the importance of legal and regulatory compliance. Then, explain your process for understanding and following relevant frameworks, like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CFAA, in the U.S., or the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, in Europe.
So it's not just about knowing the law. It's about actively making those legal considerations part of your testing process.
Exactly. Mentioning that you always get written permission from the client before doing any testing is vital.
It shows you respect legal boundaries and put ethical conduct first. You're not some rogue hacker. You're a professional working within a set scope.
RoleCatcher's AI can help you refine your answer by suggesting you mention specific parts of contracts that address legal and ethical concerns. This shows you pay attention to detail.
It's those little things that can make you stand out and show your professionalism.
Now, as we head into the final part of our deep dive, remember that a successful ethical hacking interview is about more than just technical skills.
We've covered a lot of technical stuff.
We have.
But you're not just a walking set of skills and tools.
Exactly.
You're a person, and they want to know if you'll fit in with the team.
Let's shift gears a bit. From specific questions to the bigger picture of the interview.
Okay, yeah, we've gone through a lot of technical details.
We have, but you're not just a bunch of skills.
Right, you're a person. And they want to know if you'd be a good fit for their team.
Exactly. So let's talk about showcasing those soft skills, those interpersonal abilities.
This is where communication and teamwork come in, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about being a lone wolf hacker anymore.
You're part of a team, working together, sharing knowledge, all aiming for the same goal.
So how do you highlight these soft skills during an interview? It's not as easy as explaining how you used a technical tool like Nmap.
It's about weaving those skills into your answers, even when you're talking about technical things.
Can you give us an example?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's say you're talking about a penetration testing project you worked on.
A classic ethical hacking scenario.
Instead of just focusing on all the technical stuff, also mention how you communicated your findings to the client.
Oh, I see. So you'd explain how you adjusted your communication style to their level of understanding. Because not everyone is a tech expert.
Precisely. Maybe you created a simplified report for the non-technical folks. Or maybe you gave a presentation explaining the vulnerabilities and what could happen if they weren't fixed.
That shows you can bridge the gap between the tech world and the non-tech world, which is a super valuable skill for an ethical hacker.
Another example is highlighting your teamwork skills.
Okay, so let's say you're discussing a really complex security assessment, one that involved a whole team of people.
Talk about how you worked with others, how you split up the tasks, and how you made sure everyone was on the same page.
Maybe you led brainstorming sessions to find vulnerabilities, or mentored less experienced team members, sharing your knowledge and helping them learn.
Those examples show that you can work well as part of a team, which is essential in any cybersecurity role.
And don't forget about showing enthusiasm. That can really make a difference to the interviewers.
Definitely. Cybersecurity is such a dynamic and ever-changing field. Let your passion shine through.
Show them you're genuinely excited about ethical hacking, about the challenge of staying ahead of the bad guys and keeping companies safe.
That kind of excitement is contagious. It can leave a lasting impression.
Now, before we wrap things up, let's touch on preparation.
Preparation is absolutely crucial. Research the company, find out what industry they're in, and think about the kinds of security challenges they might face.
RoleCatcher can be super helpful for this, right?
It really can. Use the platform to check out the company's tech stack, see if there are any known vulnerabilities in their industry, and even find out if you have any connections who work there.
That kind of tailored preparation shows you're serious about the job and that you've done your homework.
And don't forget about RoleCatcher's library of interview questions.
It's like having a cheat sheet, but in a good way.
It's a great way to practice your answers.
Practice answering common ethical hacking interview questions out loud, even if it feels a little weird at first.
The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll be, and the better you'll be able to express your thoughts during the real interview.
It's like rehearsing for a play or a presentation.
Exactly. The more you rehearse, the smoother and more confident you'll sound.
And here's one last tip that could give you an edge.
Think about new technologies or emerging threats that you find interesting.
So go beyond the basics and show them you're thinking ahead, that you're curious about the future of cybersecurity.
Research those new areas, think about how they affect ethical hacking, and be ready to discuss them in the interview.
That kind of forward thinking is highly valued in the cybersecurity world.
It shows you're dedicated to continuous learning and that you can adapt to the constantly changing landscape of threats.
So to wrap up our deep dive into prepping for an ethical hacking interview, remember, it's about more than just technical skills.
It's about showcasing those soft skills, your passion for cybersecurity, and your ability to think critically and ethically.
Preparation is key. With the right resources and the right mindset, you can ace that interview and launch an exciting and rewarding career in ethical hacking.
And remember, RoleCatcher is there to support you every step of the way. Use its AI tools, check out its resources, and connect with other cybersecurity professionals in its community.
Best of luck. And remember to stay curious, stay ethical, and stay ahead of the game in the world of cybersecurity.